Welcome to Shaped by Faith with your host, Theresa Rowe. To find out more about Shaped by Faith and Theresa Rowe, please visit shapedbyfaith.com or visit the YouTube channel, Facebook, or Instagram. And now, here is Theresa Rowe.
Welcome to Shaped by Faith, where we shape our bodies and hearts for God's purposes. I have a very special guest on Shaped by Faith today. She's been on before, but let me intro her. As we approach December 7th, the solemn anniversary of Pearl Harbor, it's important that we pause and that we remember and honor those who lived through one of the darkest mornings in America's history. On December 7th, 1941, our nation was thrust into World War II with Japanese forces launching a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. A moment President Roosevelt would famously call a date which will live in infamy. Today, we have a very special guest whose connection to that day is deeply personal. Her father, Marshal Winfield Dude Bowden Jr., was a young 22-year-old military policeman stationed at Schofield Barracks, standing on duty, overlooking the harbor when the bombs began to fall. He survived the attack. He fought at Guadalcanal in New Georgia Island, endured more than 350 combat attacks, and carried the invisible scars of war for the rest of his life. His daughter, Patsy, has preserved those powerful memories, blending history with reflections of faith, trauma, and redemption. And Patty's also a journalist. She's been on Shaped by Faith before. She's a retired teacher, and she's a very gifted storyteller, working on several writing projects. Patsy, welcome back to Shaped by Faith.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. Okay, so Patsy, take us back to your father in 1941. Okay, where was he stationed and what was happening in his life at the time?
Well, he volunteered for service. The country was kind of sitting on the fence, not yet committed toward helping our allies, but the war had not been declared as far as the United States was concerned. But my dad went ahead and joined the Army and was trained at Camp Shelby in Mississippi, and got the dream assignment to go to Pearl Harbor on the island of Oahu in Hawaii to serve as a military policeman for the Army. These Mississippi boys come into the military already trained in how to use weapons and that kind of thing. So it was easy for him to move up the ranks to a sergeant and became a military policeman. And he was there directing traffic before the attack began. And he got to watch the whole thing from a hillside position at an intersection where he was directing traffic before church that morning.
That is incredible, Patsy. I mean, I can see it right now, him directing traffic, overlooking everything. Okay, why don't you give us a description of what happened as the attack began?
Well, he was standing there, directing traffic for the people going to and from the base, going to church. And there was a swarm of what looked like airplanes in the distance. And he could see the sun glinting off the wings of the airplanes. He thought that was some of our planes coming in from a maneuver, but proved to be differently in that case. He watched as the first bombs were dropped, and he realized all of a sudden this was not our men. This was the Japanese attacking us. A couple was driving through the intersection, and the little old lady in the truck, it was a 1930s pickup truck with running boards on the sides. And the lady scolded my daddy and said, "Young man, why are they having maneuvers on Sunday? Don't you know they'll disturb the churches? It's too loud." And my dad, in no uncertain words, said, "Hell, lady, that's not maneuvers. That's Jap bombers. We're being attacked. Get out of here." As they drove off, a Japanese Zero, one of their aircraft, had guns mounted on the wings, and they were strafing the ground with bullets as they came closer and closer to where my dad was directing traffic. And he saw as this plane knocked the running boards off both sides of that truck. but as far as he knew, the old couple sped away without being injured. The plane came back and did a bank and came toward him, strafing the ground. There was a sugarcane patch behind where he was standing, and there was a drainage ditch there. And he jumped into the drainage ditch in his MP uniform and ducked his head, and the plane riddled the sugarcane patch behind him. And when he stood up after the plane left, he stood up and was wearing sugarcane juice and pieces of sugarcane all over his uniform. But he made it through and managed to continue directing traffic while all of the bombing was going on in the harbor. And he got to see firsthand the horror of war, what was supposed to have been a dream assignment where he would be able to relax on Waikiki Beach and watch the hula girls and be presented with leis because they were there performing duties to protect the island. All of that changed. War was really literally hell at that point. He saw men jumping from the bows of the ships. The ships were on fire, but they would jump from the fiery ships into the water, hoping to survive. But instead, all the fuel was on the top of the water on fire itself. So they were jumping from one fiery death to another. And he described it to me as a lake of fire, with all these ships being bombarded by the bombs and the men just being annihilated and dying horrible deaths there.
Well, that's an incredible story, Patsy. I can't even imagine it. And they had no idea it was coming.
Oh,
but you said
yes, they did.
He continued to direct traffic as this is
Right.
going on.
They knew in advance that something might happen. My dad, as an MP, often served as a courier delivering messages to the higher ups. And he had in his hand a communique that he delivered to Kimmel and Short, the generals who were over the Navy and the Army. A few days before, they said that the Japanese Navy had disappeared from radar, so to speak, and they were warning the area to be on the lookout for possible attacks from the Japanese. The Japanese had their diplomats in Washington trying to broker a deal to get some sanctions removed that would allow them to have fuel and things that they were wanting, because they were carrying on some operations against what is now Vietnam and China. And they needed our fuel and supplies, and because they were possibly going to attack Korea, and Japan was involved in all of these diplomatic talks, we were warned that it could happen because there was already war in Europe with Mussolini in charge of then the Nazis with Hitler, all joining forces with the Japanese now. And everybody was lined up either as an ally or part of the enemy side with Russia and China, and all were kind of allies of ours at the time. And we were trying to get Japan to, stop attacking these other places who were doing business with us, and they were carrying on a war. Well, the communique said that it was possible that the Japanese fleet was headed to their direction, but they thought that probably either Midway or the Philippines would be their first spot that they would probably go to attack. And they told us, the men in this communique, to be prepared in case an attack should occur. But they really didn't expect it to hit Pearl Harbor because there were too many military people there. And they thought that it would be foolish on the Japanese part to attack the United States so blatantly. But they felt like the Philippines or Midway might be the ones attacked. Now, my dad delivered that communique to both Short and Kimmel, and they made an announcement. And they were told in that communique to be ready in case they were needed, and to stand down until further notice. Well, they lined the aircraft up at the Air Force Base there and had them side by side ready to take off. And later, Kimmel and Short were criticized for having the airplanes like that because it allowed the Japanese bombers to just come in and take them out one right after the other in a line, like dominoes falling. And they faced a possible trial for not doing their duty. But my father said they were told to stand down and to be prepared. They were doing that. They were prepared. They stood down. They were waiting for further notice, and it never came. And my father said that if there had been a trial to accuse these men of dereliction of duty, that he would have testified on their behalf that it came from farther up because we never got the word to be prepared or to do anything other than stand down.
Incredible. I'm taking all this in. I am so intrigued. It would, your story, your father's story would make an amazing movie one day. As I'm listening to it, I'm like, he saw the whole thing go down. So why don't you go ahead and continue? The attack happened. Your father saw this. Um,
Uh,
yes.
when he finished directing traffic and went back to his barracks at Schofield Barracks, there were bullet holes in the walls. Some of his fellow soldiers had been killed. He and others in the military police unit had to watch out for looters. They had to also fear the possibility that Japan was about to invade the island. So they declared martial law, and his military unit was in charge of keeping the peace and protecting them from invasion. So their unit was featured in the Saturday Evening Post article about their 3 years of martial law that they maintained for the island. He had the unpleasant duty of having to help get some of the bodies out of the bay. Some of the bodies, he said, were so badly burned. Like I said, he saw men jumping from one fiery death to another when they entered the water and the water was on fire. And when they would pull these bodies out of the bay and put them in the skiffs, the bodies would actually fall apart because they were so cooked. It was just a horrific, horrific thing. It was nothing like the paradise he had expected. He thought he had an easy assignment, but it wasn't. It was one of the worst. There were some midget submarines that had been taken out earlier during the attack. There was the fear that they might be invaded. And for 3 years, they maintained martial law there. But his unit and some of the others who were well trained were transferred with the 25th Infantry Army Division to Guadalcanal to help the Marines who had gone in there to try to stop the Japanese from building an aircraft strip, an airstrip. And it was a swampy, terrible place to have to try to invade. And the Marines had already pretty well taken control of the island, but there were snipers in the trees. My dad was a sharpshooter, and he was given the job of getting rid of the snipers that were hiding in the trees. And they had to tromp through all this swamp and battle the snakes and the wet feet, and he ended up with malaria before it was all over. When he finished at Guadalcanal, they had many, many attacks. He kept a journal of all of the attacks, over 350 attacks he was part of, and he listed the number of casualties, the types of aircraft involved, the equipment that was used, and how many were injured, and all that was in a record. But then when he got to New Georgia Island in the Solomons also, he lost that journal because it got wet in the swamps there. But in New Georgia Island, he learned something that his sergeant in basic training had taught him. He said, that the two main things you need when you're in the military is your hard hat, and the other thing is your shovel. And this was the kind of shovel that they used to dig a foxhole. He was taught that you dig in, make a foxhole, and you rise up and use your gun when needed, but otherwise stay hidden in the foxhole. Well, that's what saved him in New George Island. He was in a foxhole, and a bomb landed nearby, and it blew him out of his foxhole, ruptured his eardrums, and after it was over, between that and the malaria, he had what they call post-traumatic stress disorder today. Back then, they called it shell shock. And after 350 attacks and all of these things that he had gone through, horrific experiences in the war, and having to kill his fellow man when it went totally against his religious upbringing, he really was a nervous wreck. They sent him home to Kennedy Hospital in Memphis. The Kennedy complex was a place for soldiers who were recovering from the war. And he was there for several months recuperating from the shell shock and the malaria. And he had some shrapnel wounds from his encounter with the bomb nearby. But he was never the same. Always after that, he was nervous. We couldn't slam a door as children. We couldn't slam a door without his feeling like somebody was attacking him. He didn't like the noise. He didn't like crowds. He was happiest when he was walking the hills and the valleys of our little area in Benton County, Mississippi. He loved to hunt and fish. That was when he was at peace. He and the Lord were one together in nature, and he felt happier doing those kind of things than being around a crowd of people. Now, he left the family farm. They sold that after a few years after my grandfather died, and we moved into town, and he bought a little grocery store and operated a little store where people could come in and sign their name on a book, take all the groceries they wanted, and then they were on their honor to pay by the end of the month, and that was how we lived until he died for the first time. I call that the first time because he actually died twice. But anyway, that his experiences during the war created a nervousness in him that never left. He was quiet. All three of us girls, after we got into high school, were basketball players, and we would have these big games. And he would come to the gymnasium and stand at the door and look in, and the loud noise and the people, he would just turn around and walk out and leave. He was a big supporter, but he couldn't stand the crowds and the noise.
Yeah.
And
Patsy, did he, back in those days, did they give them help? Did they try and help them with this?
well, at the Kennedy complex, they did, but he was sent home without any kind of psychological support or anything like that. Back in those days, this is something new. Uh, in my lifetime, it started. They've been working more with the psychology of helping the soldiers, but back then he was on his own.
Now he wasn't married to your mother yet, correct?
He wasn't married when he came home. He didn't marry her until 1948, and I was born in 49, and so it was tough for him, especially with little ones making noise all the time. And he still had that spit and polish military attitude. His shoes had to be just so. His bed had to be made just so, just like the military required. And we were brought up with that military kind of training that everything had to be just so. But he would often share his thoughts and feelings with his friends at the grocery store. Older men would come in and sit in front of an old pot-bellied stove in the middle of the store, and they would talk politics and religion. And my dad would use this book right here as his backup. whenever a political or a religious issue came up. This book was from the 1800s, and it's an interpretation of the Bible. And he always, used it to understand what he didn't understand when he read the Bible directly.
That is so good. So he was a man of faith.
Right, totally.
Your father and his generation was the greatest generation that ever lived. I mean, they were tough as steel to endure what they endured, to come back home, to not have the necessary emotional support that they needed. And it sounds like, Patsy, he was a very loving father. You know, he showed up for your games. He was a man of faith. You said in the last segment that he died twice. Can you explain that?
Well, our little hometown did not have an ambulance service. My mother worked for the local doctor, and she realized one night when he woke up with chest pains going down his left arm that was classic signs of a heart attack. So she and my great aunt, Betty Ruth Carroll, got in the car and whisked him to Memphis, an hour and a half drive that took about an hour to do because they were speeding so much. But they went straight to the VA hospital, and he literally died on the gurney as they were loading him into the hospital. His heart stopped. Luckily, they had that new defibrillator machine. It was something new at that time, and they put the paddles to his chest and brought him back after 2 minutes of being so-called dead. During that time, he was aware of being above the room, watching as the doctors worked on him, and he was drawn toward a light. And unlike other people who have had that experience, some say it's caused by lack of oxygen to the brain, but he encountered not the euphoria that a lot of people talk about. He encountered what he saw as a lake of fire. What a lot of us wonder is, was it a memory of Pearl Harbor, or did he really see a lake of fire as if he were heading to hell? When he woke up and they brought him back to life after 2 minutes, he firmly believed he was on his way to hell, and he was being given a second chance to relive his life and make some things right that were wrong. And I think mainly it was the guilt about what went on during the war that made him feel worst. And he never really wanted to kill people. He didn't mind killing animals for food and that kind of thing, but to kill another human being, I think, went against the grain for him. It went against his religious teachings. So for the rest of his life, which was only another year, the doctors told him that he would probably have another heart attack, and this one would be fatal. And so he knew that his life with us would probably be short. So that Christmas before, he gave us a scroll with a little red ribbon tied around it. Here it is. And in that scroll is a handwritten copy of his favorite Bible verses, because he felt like that since he wouldn't be there for us as we grew up, we would need some guidance from him. So he left that as a Christmas present under our tree, and all three of us girls got a copy.
Wow.
So he became a Bible scholar during that last year. He wrote a poem about his experiences. He was out one day raking leaves, doing the worst thing that the doctor said he should not do, which is use his upper body arms. So my uncle drove by and saw my dad doing that and thought he should be doing it. And when he came back by the second time, he saw the rake tines up on the ground. And he went in to check on my dad, and he was lying on the bed and died there with my uncle by his side and a little kitten on the bed right there beside him.
Oh, wow.
But my father told me one day when he was bringing me home from Ole Miss, we stopped and watched two raccoons playing in a tree between Holly Springs and Oxford. It's a swampy area, and we just stopped, and he said, "Be sure to tell my story." He says, because if there is a hell, there is also a heaven. And he says, I firmly believe that what I experienced was hell, and that I've been given a second chance to go to heaven. And that's what we have to believe that he did.
Absolutely.
But he died on December the 15th, and 47 years later, my mother died on the exact same day. Very ironic.
Yeah.
Almost the same time of the day that she died. So my sister, Kathy Hendricks, is in New Mexico. She worked as a special education teacher and a second grade teacher. She's retired now. We've all been in education. The middle sister between me and Kathy is Marcia Yarbrough. She is retired from the University of Tennessee, where she set up microbiology labs for future doctors and nurses. We're all three the direct result of his teachings, and he always had in his growth from the mistakes of others, because you can't live long enough to make them all yourself. And he would always add, and you wouldn't want to either, would you? So he's taught us a lot of valuable lessons. And he now has four grandsons, and three grandsons and one great grandson. No, three great grandsons. Gonna have to think again. But anyway, we hope to carry his story forward and remind people that if there is a hell, there is also a heaven, and he firmly believed that.
Patsy, that's an incredible story. It is amazing. And I do believe he's in heaven. I mean, wow. To go through that experience, to die twice, the first time and see that. But the stories that you shared about his life, what an incredible legacy that he left behind. And you are sharing his story and you are honoring him. And I want to thank you so much for sharing his story on Shaped by Faith.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your interest in this. I know you have a good following, and a lot of people will hear this story. Hopefully somebody will hear it and be impressed by it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening. I'm Theresa Rowe. Everyone have a blessed day. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Shaped by Faith with Theresa Rowe. Remember to visit shapedbyfaith.com to find out more about workouts, the TV show, podcasts, blogs, Shaped by Faith products, and much more.